Welcome. My name's Mark Brown, um, and I'm an independent special needs consultant working at Special Help for Special Needs. My role is to come into the family home, work with the individual and the family and any relevant professionals and carers around a whole range of issues, including things such as behaviour, anxiety, puberty, and things like relationships and social skills. Now, today I'm going to be talking to you about neurodiversity and the issue of relationships. This is a massive issue, not just for the child, for the teenager, but also for the adult. And it's a thing that progresses throughout our lives. Every single stage of our life that we go through will involve some form of relationship building, will involve some form of social skills. The difficulty we have these days is that, unfortunately, much of the sex education, the sex and relationship education that is supposed to be provided within schools, whether it's a specialist placement, whether it's mainstream, actually doesn't cover everything in the way it should. For the last 5-6 years, I've been doing the PhD, which was research based upon autistic individuals in the sex education. And one of the things that was coming up within that was the fact of, with sex education, looking at the biological aspects is easy. There's diagrams, there's books, there's films, there's videos. When it comes to the social sexual side, the relationship side, that's where it goes wrong. One of the things that I say about the new now called relationship sexual education program that is supposed to have been started in September 2020, but who knows with COVID at the moment, is the fact that it starts from a young age. It starts from the moment the child enters the school in reception. I entirely agree, because at that stage we shouldn't be talking necessarily about relationships, but one of the things we need to look at is about how to build friendships. Because at the moment what we tend to do is sex education, and this is coming from people that coordinate sex education in some of the specialist placements that were involved in the research I did, and also from autistic teenagers who were involved in a focus group where we talked about the relationship, the social side of the sex education. And a lot were saying that it's not covered in an appropriate fashion. Often, as one group highlighted, their social relationship side of sex education was not taught until they were about 14. And usually it's a reaction to something that had gone wrong. By that time, most of them had trialled themselves and tried to work their way through the quagmire that was relationship building, and often got it dreadfully wrong. Whereas with the new program, as I said, it starts off with friendships. How can we develop good, healthy, honest relationships, no matter how intimate they may be, if we don't know how to do the simplest of things, such as making friends? You know, we talk a lot about the sex side in sex and relationship education, but you know, often at the moment or prior to the present program, you would find that a lot of the conversation is talked about up to roughly about year 5, when we get to see the video of somebody giving birth, and we talk about how you got to that stage, how a baby's made. But nobody ever talks about the building of friendships, the building of relationships that happens before then. And then later on, when they're in secondary school, they often have the conversation about how not to have babies or catch sexually transmitted diseases by the use of condoms. But we still don't talk about relationships. We don't talk about friendships. So all we're doing at the moment is just looking at those key bits. We're not talking about joining everything together. We're not enabling somebody to understand what friendship is. And that's why often we do have difficulties that will explode concerning people making friends inappropriately, not knowing what is happening around them, and even getting themselves into trouble because of the way that they try to build a relationship comes across as stalkish and harassment style. That's not because they want to do it that way. It's because nobody's actually spent any time talking with them about that. Nobody's actually done it properly. Now, as I said, throughout our lives, we have different stages where things will come along and the social skills that we had aren't adequate enough. We need to add on to it. So, for example, often it's around about the age of about 10 when we start thinking about we're moving on into the next stage. And then when we get into secondary school, a lot of the emphasis in secondary school is around relationship building. And if you haven't got the relationship skills, then how are you going to actually transition effectively onto that next stage? And then from there, it's looking at things like going on to college, going on to university, working. Each single one requires a different level of friendship skills, different level of relationship social skills. And we need to be recognizing that what often happens is throughout life, we have to develop new skills. When we want to have a relationship, when we want to, have a partner and maybe get married, have a family, all those sorts of things that, are seen by the neurotypical world as being what is expected. But each level requires another set of social skills. So, this talk, although, we are looking at social skills, we're looking at the future. It's important to remember that what I talk about is something that's very organic in nature. Very much it grows and it goes different ways. Some people, it goes down the route of not necessarily having a wide friendship circle because that's through choice. Sometimes it's not through choice, it's through lack of skills. And then there's others where they may want lots of friends, but they haven't necessarily got the skills. And this is one of the things to remember with anybody who's got any neurodiverse issues, that some will want to have those relationships, will want to have friendships, will want to have something intimate. Others couldn't care less. And it's us as neurotypical people putting our views onto them that they need to have these relationships. And the difficulty when we start going down that route is that we can actually impact negatively upon that person's ability, that person's mental health. We look at the world and we go, you've got to be able to socialise, you've got to be able to do this, you've got to be able to, all those sorts of things. No, we don't. Why? Why do we need to? Yes, human beings are social animals. We have to recognise that. But we don't have to all be the same social level. For example, I worked with a young lad who was at a mainstream school, and they were very insistent he learned social skills. He had Asperger's syndrome, and it was very much a case of there was a lot of issues concerning being in the social world of school, whether it was at lunchtime, whether it's coming into classes, and everybody was saying, "No, he's got to do this, he's got to do this, he's got to do this." I became involved because things were getting rather stressful, and quite understandable because the pressure was on. I walked in and he was playing Minecraft, which is a common theme with some of the people I work with. But actually, the conversations he was having were completely 100% fine. He was having lovely conversations. One of the reasons being, he wasn't there in person. There was a screen. He couldn't even see the person's face. There was no eye contact needed. They were talking about their common theme, which was Minecraft. They were comparing what they were building. If he felt that he couldn't talk, he didn't talk. There was no feeling uncomfortable about not talking. Ultimately, if he didn't want to carry on talking full stop, he would just disengage. So he had social skills. What he didn't have was the social skills for everyday life. So I turned around to him and I said, and at this point he wanted to go to university, which he was quite capable of going to university. And I said to him, have you ever been down the corner shop to buy yourself a bar of chocolate? And he went to me, no, I can't do that. It means I've got to talk to the person behind the counter. So I said, okay, how the heck are you going to survive when you go to university? Because when you go to university, you're going to have to get your own food. You're going to be in accommodation where there's going to be people you don't know. You're going to have to get involved with your course, especially group work, because you hate group work. So how's that going to work? At that point in time, everybody started to realise he didn't need to be a party animal. He had sensory processing issues anyway, so if he went into a party, you'd find him under the table or running out the front door. From that moment on, the emphasis changed. The emphasis was more about what does he need socially to survive, to develop a friendship or two if he needed to. And so from that moment on, we worked on those sorts of aspects. We sort of looked and went, okay, you need all these skills, and it worked. He went to university. Cheated a little bit with the food because he ordered it online. However, he still had to speak to the person that was delivering it. He knew that if he came out of his bedroom and there was somebody there, you said good morning or good afternoon, whatever was relevant. When it came to being in the kitchen, if he was cooking, he knew that if somebody came in, you might have to engage in a conversation. So we worked out some ideas concerning conversations. He did the groups because he knew he needed it. When it came to Freshers Week and all the party weeks, he never got involved with those. He didn't need to. He didn't want to. His version of Freshers Week, he took his, I think it was his Xbox, to the university with him where he was staying, and he had Freshers Week online, talking to his friends. So he was still engaging. He was still socialising. And often what we do is we sort of say, oh, they're not socialising. They're not able to engage. Actually, they are. It's just maybe face-to-face. When you think about having a conversation with somebody, you've got to immediately process what's going on. Immediately, you've got to, okay. When you're online, you have that chance to think before you type a message, before you say something online. You have that chance to process things. So hopefully, what the aim of this talk is going to be is to explore those things. It's to recognise that there are lots of things that can be done that are informal. A lot of the time, if you're trying to develop somebody's social skills, the best place to do it is part of the family, whether they are a child, teenager, or adult. Whether they're transitioning onto school, transitioning onto the future. It's about giving them the chances to actually use the social skills in a practical session. It's being able to have those messages passed on to them. And it's remembering that a lot of people, a lot of neurodiverse individuals, for example, somebody who's autistic will often not be able to pick up the subtleties of social skills. So they need us to actually highlight and to teach them that. We should never make an assumption that somebody knows. Because if we do that, then what will happen is they will make mistakes. If we assume that they understand that what we're saying is sarcasm, we could end up with somebody who becomes very upset by the situation. So we need to be able to teach them in as scientific as way, in a black and white way as possible, because this world is absolute chaos. It's also remembering that when it comes to social skills, that often individuals that have got neurodiverse issues will have different values compared to their peers. They may not necessarily want to be going out partying on a Saturday night. They might want to just sit in front of the TV watching Doctor Who or whatever their obsessions are. But it's important that we remember all of this, because when we do, it's very much a case of we can then help them move on. But how do we develop those sorts of issues? Well, trying to develop social independence, it's not rocket science. Some people make it sound to be rocket science, but it's not actually rocket science. It's very much a case of it's looking at how you can do it naturally. One of the biggest issues I have sometimes is with the social skills groups that are set up, that are there just to teach social skills. They're quite rigid. They're quite, this is how it's going to be. This is what you do when you greet somebody. However, if it's not done in the right way, what will happen is you'll have somebody who's not got the flexibilities to be able to deal with the world around them. Just think of the way that we sort of teach how you should greet somebody. Shake a hand, say hello, how are you? Right, we're presently in COVID-19, just about to go into lockdown 2.0. What is the one thing we are told we cannot do and we haven't been able to do since March? Shake hands. Right, so you've spent a lifetime teaching somebody that the only way you can greet somebody is to shake their hand. What are they going to do? Because suddenly everything has changed. So we need to be trying to do things that are more fluid in nature. More relevant. I mean, one of the best social skills groups I've ever seen is not a social skills group. It's actually a group that is for playing Warhammer, which are little figures, if you don't know, where you paint them and you take them to the shop, and you then have fights in the middle of it. I have a number of individuals that love playing that, and actually it's a very sociable environment for them because it gives them something to talk about. They have a common theme that they can have a discussion with somebody about, and then from there you can build on your skills, on your socializing skills. So if you've got somebody, regardless of their age, who's got some sort of special interest, whether it's art, Warhammer, gaming, something like that, use it. It gives them that chance to have that thing, that core topic to talk about. And then as they build confidence, so they can expand upon that sort of thing. And sometimes as well, you can use that that special interest to help in other ways. For example, Lego. If you've got somebody who likes Lego, get them socializing amongst those. But when we're looking at trying to develop somebody's social independence, there's an endless list, and these are only just a few. So things like participate in social activities with friends, if it's appropriate, and looking at what that social activity is. Think about them making their own lunch or drinks, because at some point they're going to need to be thinking about it. Independence concerning personal hygiene. There again, with social skills and personal hygiene, these are things that you're already doing when they were young. And as they're getting older, as they're reaching adulthood, as they're going on to the next stage in their life, you're just adding. With personal hygiene, the biggest thing is, of course, if you've got a child who's transitioning into a teenager and then into an adult, hey, we smell more as we get older. So we need to wash more. We need to use different things like deodorants and those sorts of things. Keeping their room tidy. Understanding privacy, both their own privacy and your privacy and everybody else's privacy. Because that's going to be something, and I don't mean just being naked in your bedroom. I'm talking about privacy, about communication. What needs to be held back, what need to be told to everybody. And then things like walking independently. But these are a never-ending list. There are so many things that can be done concerning social independence. And so it's important that what we do is we don't necessarily rely explicitly upon something such as social skills training. Because often social skills is best taught within a natural environment, not something that's very specific. Of course, you might find that you've got somebody who needs additional social skills when it comes to relationships and unsafe behaviour. And that's a different thing, because then you need to be able to explore those sorts of aspects as well. The trouble often is, when it comes to building relationships, when it comes to looking at social interactions for many neurodiverse individuals, regardless of what age they're at, regardless of what transitions they're going through, there's impairments within the social interaction. So things such as an inherent lack of inherent understanding concerning what social cues there are available, what conversational skills you need, being able to start a conversation, how to maintain that conversation, how to keep it flowing. Looking at a social situation and being able to go, well, okay, we're in this aspect. There's something slightly different here. What do I need to do? How do I work with this? Issues around emotions, because our communication is not just about the words and the sounds. It's about what's behind it. One of the difficulties during the COVID-19 lockdown and everything has been the fact that we've had to resort to resort to using Zoom or Team, doing stuff online. We can get some of the emotional side of it, but actually, when you're looking intensely at somebody's face on a big screen, and as you'll probably see, I'm quite animate with my hands, you can't pick up on some of the emotions that might be happening with that person, or because there's a delay, or you're focusing on other aspects. Plus, you can't see the body language that well. It does have a massive impact. However, if you've got somebody who doesn't particularly like emotions, this sometimes can be a perfect situation, because then they don't have to worry about dealing with those sorts of things. But then with all of these bits packaged together, these feed into how somebody can react appropriately to the social situations that are going on around them. So ultimately, if you've got somebody who is not reacting in an appropriate fashion, is finding it difficult to deal with those sorts of things, it's probably because they've got the deficits in the other areas. And without any of these, you have issues concerning their understanding about how to build relationships, how to build friendships. If you've got somebody who wants to have friends, knowing how to develop those, how to link into them. The fact that, for example, knowing that it's not about whether or not you can buy things for somebody, buy drinks, buy food, give somebody money. That's not how you set up a friendship. But if you don't have the basic understandings, you're going to be in a position where you're not going to know how properly to react to a situation and to then form those relationships. Also looking at trying to understand the suitability of a peer, knowing whether what this person is doing is actually the right thing. Thinking about what friends are for, calling somebody a friend, but actually they're not. It's remembering that as somebody transitions through their life and goes on to the future, so going into, for example, a work environment, it's knowing the different relationships. You might have some friends, you might have some acquaintances, you might have work colleagues, but it's knowing where each one fits in and knowing what each one is for. Also, when it comes to what friends are for, it's not just about knowing what their friends are for, it's knowing what they as a friend should be doing. Because often we focus on, right, okay, what is a friend for? What's a good friend? What's a bad friend? And I do that a lot. We talk a lot about good and bad, and give scenarios, etc., concerning friendships. But often what we don't do is we don't sort of turn it on its head and go, okay, let's look at you as a friend. Do you think you're a good friend? Do you think you're a bad friend? Why? We do a lot concerning everybody else. Then within that, it's about how to maintain these friendships. Because if we don't know any of these bits and pieces, we then have issues around maintaining friendships. About how to deal with more than one person. Quite often the individual I work with, having one person works wonderful because they can have one conversation. Bring in another person, and then suddenly you've got those two having conversations. Should I be involved in those? But that person's taking over the attention. There's jealousy, and so whatever age the person is, they can often find that difficult, and so will disappear off. Or what you might find is that they've made a friend, and they become quite obsessive about that friend. Finding them on all the social media, texting them at ungodly hours, and then the moment that there's no reply or it's gone slightly wrong, then they start reacting in an inappropriate fashion. And I've had a number of people that have reacted in inappropriate fashion, put inappropriate comments on because this person who they deemed as their friend had the audacity to find another friend. And I often describe friendships to anybody that I work with as, if you imagine a Christmas tree, you've got your star at the top, and that star is your bestest bud. But then on each level, you've got other baubles, other decorations, and each level is another set of friends. So you can have all these different levels of friends and colleagues and acquaintances, but you've still got your bestest friend at the top. And it means you can share yourself out and they can share themselves out. So it's important that we look at these sorts of things. Now, one of the things we do tend to look at before I go on to risk and vulnerability, because this all links together, concerning things such as the friendships, concerning things such as risk and vulnerability, is the issue of scripts. We have in our life a whole load of scripts that we go by. Now, those scripts cover every aspect of our life. It means that we know what we should be doing at any given time, whether it's a script about going to work, whether it's a script about going to training, whether it's a script about starting up a relationship or a friendship. But we have these scripts, and if I said to you, show me your scripts, you wouldn't be able to, because they're all in here. They're things that we've absorbed. They're things that we've absorbed and then changed around and manipulated. If you could show me, it would be a massive book of every single script that you would use, whether it's meeting and greeting, whether it's doing anything social will have a script that we have followed, we have built up in ourselves. The difficulty often is that with neurodiverse individuals, the amount of scripts and the need for changing those scripts can be very confusing and very difficult, because different people will do different things. For example, when it comes to having an intimate relationship, that can vary depending on various factors. I once did an exercise with a group of various groups of people, where I said to them, right, okay, write me a script from the moment you meet a person to the moment that you become intimate. And I had 25 groups, and there was 25 different scripts. It depended on what was happening. There was one group where it was all youngsters who had been out partying at the weekend. So, their script reflected what had happened. There was others where, they were older and they wouldn't have done those sorts of things. So we have to remember about these issues concerning scripts, because if we try and teach too much in the way of scripts and stay rigid to them, then what will happen is things will go wrong, because we might have forgotten a script to follow because we haven't had that experience, or the person hasn't had the experience. They might take bits from a script and put it together in the wrong order. So we then have to be remembering that although we follow these scripts, there's an awful lot of difficulty concerning trying to teach them and trying to understand them. And is it any wonder that many of the individuals I work with get into difficulties concerning their socializing? And that then leaks into the issue of vulnerability. Because somebody who's got neurodiverse issues have a number of difficulties concerning their social development, or can. So not understanding the intent of somebody that they may be involved with. Not understanding how maybe they're being coerced into doing something. Especially if somebody, an individual, neurodiverse individual, really wants to build a relationship. Also, a lack of awareness concerning appropriate boundaries, or having poor appropriate boundaries. Sometimes because they've got a different filter system to everybody else. Lack of experience or the ability to learn from those experiences, because each time they do something, yes, I'm going to learn from that, but actually I've boxed it away in my mind. So and trying to adapt it is a very difficult thing. Lack of guidance, because what happens is we make assumptions. And going back to lack of experience, if we're teaching somebody all these skills and then they can't actually have the opportunity to use them, is that fair? It's not. So we need to be thinking about how can we safely give them those opportunities. And then issues concerning the recognition of the social and emotional cues, so that you know how they're interacting and how that is having an impact upon their understanding. If you've got, for example, a teenager who then, or even an adult who becomes involved with a group that are not necessarily the appropriate type of group, how do they know? Because maybe those people are masking by putting up different emotions, and it's more, they're not understanding what's going on. But then everybody else is vulnerable from the individual, because the individual may have a lack of understanding concerning how everybody else is feeling and what their needs are. So, they're trying to have a friendship, they're trying to have these interactions, and what's happening is they're then faced with a whole range of different bits and pieces that, they're ignoring because they've got their target. They've got their target to have this friendship. And also poor understanding of the consequences of their own actions. Because, say for example, you've got somebody who thinks, because nobody has said otherwise, that it's okay to go up to a stranger and hug them. Because they've always been allowed to, and nobody's corrected them. And it's one of the things to be remembering, that some of the things that the individual, whether they're a teenager or an adult, were doing when they were younger may have been lovely and cute, but as they're growing up, as they're turning into that teenager, as they're transitioning and going off into adulthood, these things are not appropriate and could be misinterpreted. If you've got a hulking great brute of a man going up to a female who's then about to try and hug them, they're not necessarily going to be thinking, oh, that's sweet. They're going to be thinking, oh my God. So we need to remember that when it comes to social skills, we're actually, by teaching them the appropriate social skills and not hiding our heads in the sand, or just hope and pray that they learn them, we're actually helping them not potentially get into trouble, get into difficulties. If we're able to help them develop those skills concerning making a relationship, then it means that they're going to be less vulnerable. And so doing that, what we need to be thinking about is we need to be thinking about a certain couple of areas of teaching. And this doesn't matter whether it's a child, a teenager, and an adult. I mean, I work with the whole range, and I've got some as adults that we're still doing a lot of this sort of thing because nobody ever sat down and talked to them before. So, first off, looking at relationships. What is a relationship? What are the different types of relationships that they've got? And how we build relationships. because we need to understand those. One of the things that I tend to do when it comes to relationship building is I use sort of a circle of relationships, which is, you know, a couple of circles with the person in the middle. And what you do is you go through a list of all the different people that they may be having a relationship with: mum, dad, brother, sister, friends, school teachers, taxi drivers, all those sorts of things. And I include the police, doctor, and nurse. And we talk about how close they are to you, what the relationship is like, but we also talk about things such as, you know, how to greet that person, how to have a social interaction with them, and some of the things you can and can't do. So things like, for example, thinking about when you're going to the doctors. You know, we talk about stranger danger to all of the individuals, whether it's a child or an adult, and we say, you know, you shouldn't let a stranger see your private parts or touch your private parts. But what about, and especially when it comes to a teenager and adult, what about the first time they injure themselves in the private parts? You know, maybe they've got a urine infection, maybe they've had an accident. And you then go to the hospital, you go to the doctors. And we turn around and go, right, okay, you know, we spent all these years talking about stranger danger and how, you know, part of building a relationship is not about, you know, those sorts of things. We go, well, what's going to happen now is we're going to have a stranger touch your private parts. So you need to explore it. You need to make sure that they understand that within certain types of relationships, things may change. We also look about differences between strangers and friends and understanding what you can be doing with each one. And, you know, potentially looking at things around more intimate relationships and trying to understand those sorts of aspects. We also look at the issue of being able to say no in a relationship. And I think this is extremely important for every single neurodiverse individual, no matter what their ability levels, no matter whether they're verbal, non-verbal. One of the things that always annoys me is that sometimes I do social skills training, or, you know, within sex education programs in different organisations, different schools. And there will often be a group where it's deemed inappropriate for them to have the program. And I go, no. Yes, we might not go into all the complex details because maybe from an intellectual level they're legally unable to have a sexual relationship. However, one of the things that in any relationship you need to be able to know is how to say no when you don't want to do something or you don't like something being done, and doing it in an assertive way, not using aggression, which often the ones that I see that are at that level, they will use aggression, but it's not because they want to be nasty. It's because actually they're trying to say to you, no, I don't want this. And so I often say as well, because these individuals are undoubtedly going to require support from strangers, from staff, they need to understand if there's something they don't particularly like, that they can say no, they can give consent, or they can remove consent, and they can do it in an appropriate fashion. Because the unfortunate thing is, if we don't teach something like this, and the only thing that they've got is to maybe hit somebody because they're trying to say, no, leave me alone, then what will happen is they will get a reputation. They will get a reputation for being aggressive, not a reputation of being able to say no. So we need to help them understand the word no, why it needs to be used, when it needs to be used, and how to use it. We also then need to be looking at difference between public and private. There again, within relationships, is knowing not just locations that are public and private. And one of the things I always say at this point, whenever I talk about public and private, is the fact that we often talk about public and private areas such as bedrooms. And we talk about close the curtains and shut the door, and then they can do whatever they're wanting to do, whether it's masturbating or something like that, they're allowed to do. However, what you have to remember is there are many people that have a relationship, whether it's an intimate relationship or whether it's a friendship over the internet using cameras. I'm looking at you now with my camera. Now, I've got the curtains closed, the door shut. Doesn't mean this is private. I'm not now going to stand here naked or do anything that I shouldn't do, because actually I've got you watching me. So we need to remember when we're talking about public and private in this modern world, and especially with everything that's going on with COVID-19 and the emphasis on using videos, that actually it's not private if somebody's watching on a video camera, on a webcam. It's also for adults, particularly, but also for lots of other people, for teenagers, etc., to understand that you might think taking pictures of yourself for your girlfriend, for your boyfriend, and sending them to them is appropriate, but actually it's out there. What happens if you two decide to split? The other one could send those pictures off. Plus, anything under the age of 18 online is illegal. So by sending pictures, even if you're above 16 but under 18, you're breaking the law. So you need to be very aware of those sorts of things. Now, when it comes to relationships and especially these neurodiverse issues, there's a lot of things that we need to be thinking about. We need to be remembering that if we don't teach the right things, we don't sort of think, oh, right, okay, it's just, that's fine. If we don't sort of go, right, okay, no, actually, it's not fine. We need to help this person. What they might do is they might do things quite innocently, without any malicious intent, but which could be perceived by those around them as inappropriate. So, for example, texting constantly at night time, following somebody on all their social media, because I'm just wanting to show them that I'm here, but actually that's called stalking. So what we need to be thinking about, especially as people transition and are moving on to the future in a world where we are using all these sorts of bits of technology, we need to be making sure that they understand. And one of the things I often say about technology is the fact of we don't take technology away. What we need to do is we need to make sure they've got the right boundaries, the right parameters, but also that they are being taught the right safety rules. Because if we don't teach them the right safety rules and we take it away, when they do get a chance, they will gorge on it. And what will then happen is they will make the most and they'll realize that's where things will go wrong. I've already said this, but I can't emphasize this enough. When we're looking at building somebody's relationship skills for the future, for now, whether you've got an adult who's looking for love, whether you've got a teenager who's also doing the same bits, transitioning onto the future. If they can't understand friendship, if they haven't got the skills for friendship, then they need to be able to have those so they can understand how to develop intimate relationships instead of going straight in for the kill. Sort of going, right, okay, there's a girl, there's a boy, right, I'm going to go straight in there. This is what it's going to be like. I've got a number of individuals that are autistic that are looking at dating sites. And there's one particular that they use, and a lot of are using, which is Autistic Dating. And with that, there's a few where we're coaching them through just the basic conversation because they're trying to jump 10 steps ahead concerning, right, they've said hello to me, let's arrange to meet up. No, you slow it down. You have that conversation. You start talking through things, and then you can start doing things like exchanging numbers, and then thinking about setting up that first date. It's also important to remember that when it comes to intimate sexual relationships, often we as parents, professionals, carers, sort of think, oh my God, this is a dodgy area. Yes, it can be if it's not done, or if it's not done right. But actually, by teaching about good, honest, healthy sexual relationships alongside friendships, especially if they're adults, because they'll need the two together, that actually what we're doing is we're helping them to make sense of everything that's going on around them. We're informing them. What you got to remember is, if we don't inform them, where are they going to get the information from? When I did my research and we did the focus groups, I had teenagers and people in the post-16 services of schools going, well, the bits that we don't know about, we either talk to our friends, but most of them have also got neurodiverse issues, so they've got their own version of what the truth is. We go online, and usually it's accessing some sort of pornographic website, which is quite easy even with security systems these days. And then what happens is, if you've got somebody who takes things literally, they're looking going, well, this is how you have a relationship. This is how you have sex. No, it's not. This is all fake. Or they'll ask brothers or sisters, which often depend on the sibling relationship. That can be a bit difficult. Occasionally, they might ask parents. But I can hear parents, even across this video, I can hear parents cringing at the thought of your teenager or your adult child asking you those questions. Hard luck. We have to be involved. We have to answer them. Because if we can teach them properly, if we can do these things properly, then what will happen is they will have the information. They will be able to understand. It doesn't always encourage sexual relationships. Sometimes it's more about just understanding the concept. I've had a few people where they don't want a relationship. They don't want a sexual relationship. But they just need to understand, why is it so important to people? And that's actually an important area to think about. Some individuals, some neurodiverse individuals, do not actually want to have a relationship. They don't give two hoots. In that situation, as long as they're happy and they're safe and they've got the social skills to understand, don't panic. They may develop a relationship. I know plenty of people that don't want a relationship, and they've gone into adulthood never having a relationship, not an intimate relationship. They've had maybe one or two friends, but they don't care. So, what teaching about these sort of things does, it just gives them the knowledge, it gives them the understanding, so that they can put it into context. And if they want to have a relationship, a more intimate relationship, or a sexual relationship, then actually it means that they're safe with it. It doesn't necessarily encourage that. What it's about, it's just about putting everything into that framework and allowing them to have that knowledge. So when it comes to relationships, there's just a few strategies. And of course, with these strategies, these are quite general. These are quite generic. So it's come down to very much an individual basis. But just a few to think about. Help them to understand rules concerning relationships and friendships. Things like, how do you communicate? What sort of text messages do you send? Because a lot of the time it's texting these days. It's not, in my day it was on the telephone at the bottom of the stairs, because that was the only place the telephone was, or you actually had to chat to the person that you wanted to have a relationship with. And it's remembering that by establishing those rules, it can reduce, it doesn't stop, it reduces the chances of things like crushes becoming too intense. Because at least if they've got a crush on somebody, they've got an element of control on there. When we're talking about relationships, provide accurate information about different aspects. One of the difficult areas is the timescale and age concerning, relationships, how long it is. I often get asked, how many dates should it be before hold hands or kiss? It's difficult because it's between the person. But there again, it's talking about what feels comfortable for that individual. It's talking about issues around permission, about consent. It's talking about the age of consent. So it's remembering that it's 16 if it's face to face, but 18 if it's online. Talk to them about the concept of consent. And I mentioned consent before, but it's also remembering that with consent, it's not just a yes/no answer, because it involves things such as, have they been drinking? Have they been taking drugs? Does the person know what they're saying yes to? And, it's not just having sex. It's about holding hands, having a hug, giving a kiss. One thing to remember, though, with consent, if you've got somebody who doesn't understand the concepts, doesn't mean they can never, ever give consent. Because they can learn, they can have the informed consent by learning what the issues are, learning the different aspects, and then being able to understand, well, okay, these are the consequences of me asking this and doing this. So I can actually decide whether or not I can or not, or can't give permission. And that goes for everything. It's also about helping them to recognise the feelings that go along with having an intimate relationship. Their feelings, because they will have certain feelings that are bubbling away, and a lot of the individuals I work with find feelings very difficult to deal with. So it's about trying to work on their feelings and then being able to get them to understand other people's. Because often we do this thing concerning, well, okay, you need to understand that person's feelings. However, many of the people I work with don't understand their own feelings. So how can they understand somebody else's? So we need to be able to work on that, because then they're able to react appropriately. They need to understand the changes that happen in relationships. Even if it's, for example, you've got a partner who has a bad day and sounds a bit grumpy, doesn't necessarily mean you have to go off and, buy presents, or you have to worry that the whole thing's over with. But it's about understanding them what to do in that situation. It's also then, as I said before, it's providing them and encouraging them to have the opportunities to make friends and acquaintances, but also to then learn from those sorts of things. Because what you then have is, if we don't do it so that they go off and they try out all the things they've learned, and then come back and talk about it, whether it's a positive, whether it's negative, how the heck are they going to learn? And they need to have somebody to be a sounding board, somebody to go, right, okay. And it can be difficult for us parents, because we come from a different generation. You just look, this generation now is more your high tech, and when they say we're going out, it's not necessarily the same as when we were going out. So we need to understand everything from those points of view. Now, if we can do all of this, it doesn't guarantee that a relationship, whether it's a teenager, whether it's an adult, is going to actually work. But it's going to give them a damn good chance at gaining that understanding and being able to develop and being able to do this safely. And I think that's the key thing. Key piece of information that I can be giving you, because there is no reason why a neurodiverse individual, somebody who is autistic, for example, why they can't have relationships. It's also remembering that we cannot compare people. We can't say, well, okay, they've got autism, so they don't need to socialize. No, a lot of people do want to have relationships. We need to help them. We need to be proactive. Even if you've got an adult who requires social skills training, it's never too late. You can teach that person those skills so that they can be safer. What we don't want to do is we don't want to be reactive. The more reactive we are with something like relationships, the more chances of this going wrong. So we need to be more proactive. Because if we can get ahead of the game, so if you've got a teenager, if you've got a young child, and you're looking at the transition into the next phase of their life, what you need to be thinking about is look at being proactive. Because if you can be proactive, you're going to get them ready. As an adult, yes, being proactive can be a bit more difficult, but actually it is still possible. It's about being able to get them in a position where they've got that understanding. And I think, as I come to the end of this talk, one of the things, there's a couple of things I hope you take from this, that it's never too late to teach somebody who's got neurodiverse issues to be able to have the social skills. It's also about remembering that not everybody who's got neurodiverse issues wants to socialize, and it's recognizing that maybe we need to be thinking of what they need to live, not what we think they should have. Also, never make an assumption about what they know. Never make an assumption about what's been taught, whether it's at school, in groups, in a centre. Never make an assumption. Because also, apart from anything else, if we make an assumption, often what happens is the individual needs to learn it again and again and again. Now, the issue of relationships, this can't be covered within an hour's talk. This is just touching the surface. There's lots of resources out there, Talking Together series of books. There's lots of things to look up. Lots of videos that are really good to give you some ideas. But what I would say you need to do is it's never give up. That person, your individual, teenager, adult, child, whatever they are, whatever age, can be taught. They need to be taught and shown, and they need to be supported. I hope you found this talk useful, and I hope you can see that I think although the Family Voice event covers the preparing for transition for the future, actually the issue of relationships covers a lot of an individual's life, a lot of transitions. As said, I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, I am doing a live Q&A. I think this talk is going to be on before then. But if not, please feel free to email me at sh4sn@sky.com or phone me on 07917 454573. My website is www.shsn.co.uk. If you do try to contact me with everything that's going on at the moment, it's probably best through email. Give me a couple of days to answer because I do tend to I'm quite busy at the moment, and we can see what we can do. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event, even though it's in the online world, and I hope to see you at the question and answer session later. So take care in this new lockdown that's come through, and good luck with helping with relationships. Goodbye for now.